move on, and I'm really super excited about the next speakers who are coming in. I feel that it is a truly honor for us to have the ability to host them here in Pakistan. The speakers who are coming in, the next presentation that we have is about TRE with the body and beyond the body, energy and consciousness. I just want to tell a little bit of story about myself. I think my proper journey into the world of trauma, into my own self, also started when I becoming aware of my body, and that really happened when I went to Thailand and did the Lorient's module 1 with TRE. And trauma release exercise has been completely transformational, in helping me connect with my body, in helping me self-regulate, and basically setting up the identity of the center as well. I'm really, really pleased to have Dr. David Berceli joining us. He's the creator of TRE, and Sai as well. They're gonna be having a really wonderful exchange and conversation taking place. Dr. David Berceli, PhD, is an international expert in the area of trauma intervention and conflict resolution. He's the creator of tension and trauma release exercise, TRE. TRE is a non-verbal way of releasing deep tension created in the body during traumatic stress and experiences. David has spent 2 decades living and working in 9 countries, providing trauma relief workshops, designing recovery programs for international organizations around the world. David holds a solid academic and experiential grounding in psychotherapy and therapeutic body work. I can definitely say that David Berceli is not just an amazing sort of like practitioner, but also a really wonderful human being. The presentation will be facilitated by Sai Kani. Sai is a TRE Global Certified Trainer based in Japan. Sai has more than 15 years experience working in humanities and disaster management specialist areas in Asia and Pacifics. As a TRE trainer and provider and a life coach, Sai has been working in Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, Vietnam, Nepal, searching out more than 1,000 clients, reaching out to more than 1,000 clients in the last 10 years. We also want to mention that Sai is our TRE trainer here in Pakistan as well. She will be conducting TRE trainings here. We currently have module 2 happening for our first batch taking place, and soon we'll be having our new batch for TRE also launching hopefully by the end of this year. So I'm sharing the screen now, and off to Sai and David Berceli for their talk.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Hello, everybody. Sai, you want to say hi?
Hi.
Okay. The way we work this out is I'm going to give a little bit of a presentation, which has just a couple PowerPoints and very short videos. And then Sai is going to pick up on it and develop it a little bit further. So what I want to say, first of all, to the people attending is what we're about to do is show you a technique. So we're not going to be discussing theory, except only a foundational theory for understanding why you're doing what you're doing. This technique comes out of my experiences of living in war and watching people tremor out of terror. So, you know, when you get frightened, you actually shake, your hands shake, or your knees might shake, or your voice might begin to shake if you get scared about talking. And so I began to observe this shaking mechanism and saw how it is, in fact, part of the human condition. Every human being around the world experiences it. So I knew I was going below culture, below language barriers, below racial distinctions. It's purely human. So I began to work with several neurologists asking, why does the human body shake? What potential value does it have? Or we should have evolved out of it if it has no more use for us. And what we discovered, and what science has discovered, is basically when the body tremors, when it's afraid, or even when it's excited and happy, it could tremor. All that means is there's been a huge surge of adrenaline pumped into the bloodstream. And the way the nervous system deals with that is it begins to shake itself. It physically shakes the body as a way of reducing the high charge of adrenaline. Unfortunately, in the medical model that I come from and what we call the Western world, is that we still have not recognized the value of the tremor mechanism, and we literally medicate people to stop shaking when the body itself, by its very nature, organically wants and needs to shake, because that's how it can restore its nervous system back to homeostasis, or a balance again. So I'm going to explain that to you in a simple way and a little bit more complex way. And then I'm going to show you two videos, very short, 1 minute each. One is an animal shaking, and the other one is a human shaking. So I want to show you how this is a mammalian technique or behavior that we as humans still have inside of us and we still use. The value in learning the technique and the value in using it, as Aon is talking about, is that we can work with large populations of traumatized people, not just one at a time. Because when you're working with natural disasters or war or political violence, you're working with tens of thousands of people who are traumatized. And we need modalities that can be applied to large populations. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a PowerPoint here, and then the videos. And then we'll answer questions, and Sai can take over from there. Okay. All righty, so the first question is, what is TRE? It stands for Tension and Trauma Releasing Exercises. And it's a series of simple exercises, and they're designed to stretch and mildly fatigue the muscles. That's all. It's trying to pull the tight muscles apart, because when we have tension, our muscles are very tight. So we want to stretch them a little bit and make them a little bit tired so that we learn that we can physically let go of our holding patterns in our bodies. Okay? When we do this in the right way, this activates the natural reflex mechanism of shaking or vibrating that releases muscular tension, and it calms down the nervous system. So when the body vibrates itself, when it's shaking, it's doing two things. It's calming down the nervous system, which is a neurological process, and it's releasing the muscular tension that was associated or created at the time of the traumatic or stressful event. That's the simple explanation to this, but let me explain to you more thoroughly what's going on here. If we look at the National Institute for the Clinical Application of Behavioral Medicine, they are very clear about saying we need strategies so clients can unlearn the nervous system's response to trauma. And that's what this is. It's an automatic unlearning or letting go. Because many of us know that when you're nervous or you're stressed, no matter how much you tell yourself in your brain, calm down, calm down, calm down, you can't calm down. Just because you want to do it logically doesn't mean you're capable of doing it physiologically. So to get around that, because that's sort of an ego issue, to get around the ego, we're actually going to go from the body and get the body to inform the brain to let go because we're now safe. And here's what that looks like in neuroanatomical terms. What we're going to do is we're going to exercise the body. And in that body are muscle spindle fibers located right inside the muscle. Well, they're connected as afferent neurons, and they carry nerve impulses from the muscles to the brain. So we will do these exercises that will activate these muscle spindle fibers, which are part of the nervous system or the nervous communication system. And we're going to let this start talking to your brain. Instead of me trying to tell you to calm down, the muscle spindle fibers are going to start that conversation. Now, the muscle spindle fibers will send that signal through the spinal column. And those are central pattern generators. And they're networks of neurons located along the spine inside the gray matter in the center of the spinal column. So we have the muscles sending signals to the spine, and then it will go up into the brain. Now, the brain has basically three major systems in it: the brainstem, limbic system, and cerebellum. They're primitive. But what happens is when these signals, afferent neurons, go up to the brain responds automatically with efferent neurons. And that carries the nerve impulses from the brain back into the muscles. So the trauma impulse and imprint is activated from these subcortical regions of the brain. That means the unconscious parts of the brain. So when this sends a signal up to here, this one automatically is responding back to this signal. So the safety is being activated from here. And then the brain says, oh, we're safe. All right, I'll let go of my control. So now we have, in an unconscious way, what we call a transcortical loop. We have sent a signal from the body to the brain. The brain responds to that signal and responds back to the body. And in this process, we have activated the nervous system so that it will calm itself down, even despite the reservation of our egos, which are still trying to hold on to fear, even when it no longer needs to hold on to it. Okay? So that's what's significant about this. And because we're working purely with the body, and every human person has a body, every human person has access to this transcortical loop of communication of the body telling the brain to calm down. No different than me telling you to calm down, and I'm saying it to your brain, but your body can't do it. But sometimes if you take a deep breath or 3 deep breaths, then your body begins to tell your brain to calm down. That's the premise that TRE is built on. So now let me show you another screen. I'm going to show you a short video. Oh, wait, no, one more here. Okay, so now I want to show you how do animals shake, and then I'm going to show you a video of how do humans shake. And this will give you a visual to understand what I'm talking about, okay? So let me see here. I want to have a new share. I'm going to do this one. All right, so now we're going to watch this animal. Right here is a gazelle. It's been caught by this leopard, okay? So the leopard is going to run away, and then we're going to watch this gazelle go through its natural tremoring reaction. It has no ego to inhibit it. So that's the positive part to this video, okay? So here's the gazelle, and it's caught by the leopard. The leopard runs away. Now the gazelle looks like it's dead, but it's actually just in a freeze response. But right here in the diaphragm, you see the pulsation starting to happen. So it's starting to breathe, which means it's starting to come out of freeze. And humans are like that as well. Now, look at the severity of the shaking of this animal. It actually looks like it's injured or wounded, but it's not. It is simply tremoring the tissue itself so that the neurophysiological connection is restored. The animal comes out of the freeze response, and all of the muscles and the fascia, the tissue in the body, all reconnect again. And then once they reconnect back to the brain to create this transcortical loop that I talked about. And this gazelle, when it's done tremoring, it simply gets up and runs away like nothing ever happened to it. Now, what's beautiful about this, as we as humans have exactly that same mechanism. Our only problem is we have an ego that inhibits the mechanism, but we still have that exact same mechanism. So let me show you how humans would tremor. Now, this is a session that I had. Oops, I have to get out of this one first, sorry. All right, we'll put this one in full screen. This is a session that I had with a client, and he came into me because He was having difficulty with a lot of tension in his life. And he comes to me, and you're going to see he did the exercises. And the last exercise, he's laying on the floor, and you're going to see the tremors or the shaking only in his legs. Okay. Now, the rest of his body is completely frozen, just like that gazelle. But in the human body, the tremoring is easiest to activate in the adductor muscles, which are on the inner thigh. They will, by their very nature, start to release the hips and the pelvis in the body. Then once they release that, by their nature, they will connect to the spinal column. And you will see that his spine is now starting to release, and the shaking is starting to move its way up his body by itself. He's not thinking or concentrating in any way. This is purely a neurological mechanism in the body that's connecting with his brain. And after an hour, you can see that the tremoring has come up to his neck, it's going out his arms and his shoulders, and it's actually brought this structure back to life. It's now pulsating again, exactly what it couldn't do when it was in its frozen state or the freeze response. And all it took was simple exercises and passive laying on the floor, and the tremor mechanism itself creates the transcortical loop from the physiology to the neurology and back again. Okay, so that's what I want to, let me stop sharing here. I did. Okay, so that's what I want to tell you is going on here. This is purely physiological. We use it with large populations. It's easily accessible because it is the nature of the human organism to have this vibrating mechanism to reduce the stress and anxiety in the body and literally to relax the tissue. Okay, so that's the basic foundation of this. And now, Sai, I'm going to ask you to pick up on that, and she's going to elaborate a little bit more in depth of what happens in this process and how do we work with people.
Thank you, David. So basically, TRE is using this human inherited physiological process, just like those wild animals. And that's why it's so simple, and anyone, anywhere in the world without any education or any conditioned religion or belief system can work. And that's what we are using as baseline. And I'd like to add a little bit more to that today. The title I chose was TRE with Body and Beyond Body, Energy and Consciousness. So when I'm teaching, when I started teach TRE professionally, which is about 10 years ago, I just followed this animal model. You know, we do the exercise and we shake. And then just to let body do whatever it does. And that's basically the principle. And that's true still nowadays. But more human beings I taught, I realized that they're actually much more potential than just following that process. David, please correct me if I'm saying something wrong, okay? But more I realized, actually bringing in the conscious part of the brain into the process, instead of controlling or inhibiting, but collaborating with this tremor mechanism actually create much more impact for the people's recovery and integration of trauma. So that's why I call it, you know, we are not just the polar bears, we are human beings. You know, we do TRE, we do TRE as a human, not only as an animal. Yes, animal as a baseline, but then we have something extra called consciousness. So how do we work with our consciousness in our TRE? So that's what I call it beyond body. Okay, so how I invite a client to work with their body, basically in the first few sessions, you just follow the body, just like animals, because we don't want our conditioned mind start blaming or judging what's happening in the body. So I don't interfere anyway, just let the body experience what it wants to do. But then as the session continue over a few times and client doesn't have any resistance to tremor mechanism, I start asking questions to the client. Okay, Now the shaking happening, some parts are moving, some parts are not moving. What does it mean to you? How do you feel about that? Can you bring your awareness, your consciousness to the part that is not moving? Until I mention those parts are not moving, they're not aware sometimes it's not moving. They're more interested, intrigued by the part that's moving, but moving part isn't really a problem for us because it's moving already by itself, right? So I'm always bringing the awareness and consciousness of the client to feel into the part that which are not moving. Then when the tension goes, the neurons start activated, they start receiving information from the parts that they didn't feel before I asked that particular question. So I'm working with the client's awareness to connect with their body again, because the trauma is really about the parts of our body is abandoned from that moment of traumatic incident. So what TRE does is reconnect the part of the body that which abandoned from the moment of trauma into our entire organism, which is present now. So inviting those parts which are not moving, originally, because it's not connected, it's not moving. But as soon as I start asking questions, inviting their consciousness to try to feel that part they forgot existed, the tremors start happening. Often touching, they self-touch because the fingertips are very sensitive, so that if they can't feel that part, touching that part is very useful. And then they can receive a lot of information through their hands, and then the information goes to the brain. My shoulder exists. My wrist. So it's connect to that part of the body that is disconnected, and then start integrating that part into the main part of the organism. And the second video that David showed, that person shaking little by little from the bottom. So at the beginning, his upper part wasn't so connected, and it started from the bottom part. And then slowly tremor mechanism started to connect the upper part of the upper part of the body through the spinal cord. And that's how beautifully the tremoring can spread. But from my experience, a lot of clients have completely disconnected part of the brain that they cannot even feel that exist. And that's why TRE is designed as self-help tool. They can do it themselves. However, having a provider, the second person, to be there, and then just letting them know that, well, from what I can see, that part is not moving. What's going on? What do you think is happening inside of you? That question trigger their consciousness, their neocortex, and start searching the information. Oh, is that really? Then it was the first time they somehow get in touch with that part. And then I often say, okay, now can you feel it? Well, not really. I feel complete empty in my stomach, or completely a hole in my heart, or whatever, the shoulder, whatever. I say, okay, then let's bring the tremor into that part. Bring your breath to that part. Really try to feel the space in that part. What's going to happen? I am only guiding and facilitating as a provider. I trust the tremor mechanism will do the job, but we are just helping the tremor mechanism to be able to have an easier access to that part, which is disconnected from the rest of the body. So that's how I work with the TRE. It's a somatic work, however, consciously bringing their awareness, their consciousness into the process. And I think this is really empowering for the client because they're so used to receiving therapy as just a passive recipient. But in this TRE process, one, of course, they can learn very easily and they can do it at home by themselves. But at the same time, working with the provider, they can also feel empowered that with their consciousness, they can consciously connect to their body, and it's immediately having an impact in a very visual, somatic way that they started to connect with a different part of the body. And when all the separated part within their body connected, the intrapersonal connection, the connection to their own being, that will reflect to the interrelationship with other human beings. That's how we believe the TRE's benefit is first connect within yourself. Just incorporate, integrate all the separate part of ourselves due to trauma. Once it's integrated, that started showing out into your world, your human relationship with your family, your colleagues, your friends, or feeling safe within your body also reflect that you feel safe outside of yourself. So that's how it works. I have so many things I wanted to say, and then I was listening to the different panelists that before us. I got so inspired to talk about so many things, but I think the time is there for the question. Or if there anyone would like to ask me, David, separate questions or anything you want to hear from us together, I think it is a time for opening a space for the floor.
Absolutely, we can absolutely do that. So if there's anyone who is interested, they can just type in the questions. I think the questions are definitely available in the chat. Arslan Kani asks, my question is, how is TRE different from progressive muscle relaxation, which is more effective?
David, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, I don't have any experience at all with progressive muscle relaxation. I know what it is, but I've never had any experience with it, so I couldn't possibly compare the two at all. If the PMR requires consciousness, thought, effort, reflection in any way, then that's exactly how it would differ with TRE. You could actually watch television while you're doing TRE, because I actually don't want you to try to concentrate or think. I want you to let the body move. And then as Sai says, once that starts to happen and there starts to be a pulsation, then you begin to observe what pulsates and what doesn't pulsate, what's moving and what isn't moving. But it's not a matter of trying to concentrate to make it happen. It's the opposite. Don't concentrate. Let the body be the activator of this sort of dialogue that's going to happen in the brain and the body.
Absolutely. Then we have, does EMDR therapy regulate a dysregulated nervous system, specifically a dysregulation in the nervous system due to childhood trauma? Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I cannot mention anything about EMDR.
I definitely have a question. I think this is a great opportunity for me on a personal level to have both of you guys here. You know, I think for me personally, having done the training myself, I think the most unique thing was to know the difference between what I thought was self-regulated to after my TRE session and what I thought became self-regulated, becoming more aware of my body and seeing my nervous system go down. So in your experiences, and any one of you guys can have that question, how does it, how have your experiences been about what people usually notice the before and after difference? You know, first when they come into a TRE session, having no awareness about what TRE is and how they systematically see their nervous system change. How has your experience been about these things?
From my experience, physiological change for sure. And then also the facial muscle relaxes and their temperature body changes, the lightness in the body changes. And then of course, their own sense of calmness will change. So there is the definitely very strong change halfway through the shaking. At the beginning, you know, we do the exercise and we make our body a little bit aroused in the sympathetic. And then once we start shaking, at the beginning, you know, the person's mind is still not sure what this is about, and they feel still a little bit nervous and all that. But at some point during the shake, I can feel the drop in energy. Suddenly there is this sense of silence in their own being. And then the moment of stillness. You know, and then that's towards the end of the session. And that's my own personal observation, but the person themselves also feel there's a business in their mind and thinking future, thinking past and all that. And suddenly they just didn't think anything anymore and just be with their own body. And a lot of people report that the stillness in their mind towards the end of the shaking. And I often compare TRE with meditation, and meditation is very difficult to achieve if you have a very busy mind, very sympathetic aroused body. The TRE is really helping them to get to the point that they can start meditating, having that stillness enough for them to be able to sit in silence. So a lot of people meditate hours and hours to get to that point. But in TRE, 15, 20 minutes, you shake, you get to that point of this quiet calmness.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit to that. According to what Miriam asked, is this like cradling or rocking a baby to comfort them? It's exactly that. And that's why I love it. We innately as human beings already know that vibrating the body at a certain frequency, in fact, calms down the nervous system. That's what vibrating chairs are about at an airport. Or you have vibrating massagers that you use on your back. Your massage therapist might use it. If that frequency is correct, vibrating platforms in exercise studios, if that frequency is the right frequency, it actually activates a relaxation of the nervous system and the muscles begin to let go. So Miriam, you're right on target about that. But what I love is that we as humans know the vibrational frequency to shake a baby when they're upset. We put them on our shoulder, and we know not to do it too hard because we know that will actually agitate the nervous system. So how do we know that? How do we know to bounce a child? How do we know to vibrate them in a certain way? It's inherently human. And I'm just saying we found how to activate this inherently human mechanism in a very simple way as adults, but it's the same thing we're doing with children. And I think several people asked about restless leg syndrome. I've worked with a lot of people with restless leg. I think what restless leg is, and sometimes these like essential tremors or postural tremors as an example, I've worked with all of these a lot around the world. Sometimes this tremor mechanism helps them a lot. And the reason I think it does is because things like restless leg syndrome, I believe, is the leg trying to activate the tremor mechanism. It never gets a chance to do it fully, so it simply keeps repeating the action or the behavior. And I've had many people, even when they had Parkinson's disease, which causes tremoring, after they do TRE. Now, the tremoring can actually stop. It doesn't last for a long time, maybe a half hour or an hour, but it does stop. The best research we've had is with people with multiple sclerosis. That comes out of Denmark, where our trainer in Denmark has been working with the MS Society, and they found it hugely successful, actually so successful, they are distributing it through every multiple sclerosis center in the country of Denmark. So you can go to our website if you're looking for research, and everything that we've had in terms of research is listed there. I don't want to go through all of those individually here.
May I add something quite important when we talk about TRE is that TRE is designed as a self-help tool. And of course, it can be used in a clinical therapeutic situation by the certified therapist, but this is designed for self-help tool. But for some clients, some people who have very severe complex trauma, they cannot self-regulate. And I think self-regulation is a very important part of this story. And I think that the lady after us is going to talk about self-regulation. But it's important for us to recognize who can self-regulate, who cannot, the whole TRE experience. For example, like David said, this gentle shaking is very soothing to our nervous system. And if we have a very healthy nervous system, we know what is pleasant to us and what is not. And we can regulate that, our own shaking experience. For certain people, they don't know that. They don't have a baseline to feel what is good for them and what isn't. So they sometimes overdo it and they go way too much of this agitation. They agitate their nervous system more than before through the shaking. So that's where our training is very important. If the person is still not sure how to regulate that experience, we exist to co-regulate that experience and help them to stay in this safe area that their nervous system can deal with. So I just wanted to add that because they often create a confusion when we talk about TRE in a bigger platform.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, going along with that, Sai, there are several questions here about how do you handle flashbacks as an example. Now, we're all familiar that flashbacks means that the brain has taken itself back to some other place and it's not in the present moment. And always we have to bring the body back and the brain back to the present moment. The body's already here. We have to bring the brain back to the present moment. That's when Sai is saying, okay, if you can't handle your trauma recovery process because maybe it's too sensitive right now, then you need somebody to be with you, because what they have to keep doing is bringing you back to the present moment all the time. Right here in my office, you are safe. Bring your brain back here. Now, there are many different techniques for doing that, but I think any technique that I've seen, if the person is not capable of self-regulating, that technique has to be reduced down to maybe just minutes, whether that's EMDR or TRE or somatic experiencing or even counseling, because I'm a clinical therapist and I used to counsel people a lot. They could come in my room and if I'm just wearing the wrong color shirt, they could have a flashback of the person who had raped them in the past. And so nothing was even said or done, but immediately they were in that raw place inside of their recovery process where flashbacks would come very easily. And so it was always a matter of bringing them back to the present moment. Sometimes we would spend 20 minutes just on that, bringing them back again, then being able to get them to breathe and feel like they're safe again. And that's a continual process. So people who cannot self-regulate, like Sai said, then you've got to have somebody with you, not because TRE is dangerous or any of these techniques are dangerous. It means you just can't move as quickly as you would like to move. And many traumatized people try to push themselves into recovery the same way they were pushed into trauma. And that's when we have to keep slowing them down and saying, no, you're not going to recover using the same behavior in which you were traumatized from. So we have to be careful of that.
That's really great. I think there are a few more questions regarding chronic pain management as the nervous system constantly on alert. So would you like to say about that? And I would also like to ask if you guys could also give a bit of your experience about working with war veterans. We're trying to get TRE here in Pakistan to work with the military so that, and if you guys could sort of like share your experience around those things as well.
Okay, I've worked a lot with military all over the world, and I've worked a lot with war refugees, including military. I still work with veterans today. The real trick with them, and this would be like, if we were working, we did this in Japan, Sai, with the tsunami survivors. We had a room of about 300 people or something like that that we worked with. But the point with that is, if they've all been through the same trauma, and if they're laying on the floor and they're all tremoring, I would always tell them, if the person next to you starts to cry or they begin to feel frightened, just reach over and grab their hand, because they all self-identify with what's going on. So you can actually use the group itself as a self-regulating community, because that's what you have to teach them to do anyways when they leave, is to self-regulate as a community or as a family. Or I worked a lot with organizations, nonprofit organizations where their staff were in situations of violence. And so I would work with the organization. How do you work together? As the speaker before us, I think, said, it's not just one person who's traumatized in the organization. Everybody will be affected by that trauma. Same thing in a family. It's not one person traumatized. The whole family needs to work together because they're all affected by that trauma, even if only one person went through it. And I really appreciated that because I think it helps us remember that we are collective, we are a community, we're a species that's regulated towards safety in relationship. And so we have to continue to keep restoring that safety of relationship. You might do it initially with Sai if she's your clinician and she's in the office with you, but ultimately it's about how do we extend that beyond just being in the client's office, because when you have 100,000 people traumatized, not all of them are going to have this wonderful opportunity to go to a clinical therapist for 2 years to heal from trauma. That paradigm is already broken on this planet. Not that we can't use it, but we can't use it all the time for everyone all over the world. It does not exist. And certainly Ukraine and Russia are great examples of that. And so all of a sudden I'm getting all these people from Ukraine wanting sessions in TRE, and we're doing it with 50 or 60 people in a room.
I think this is the most significant and amazing thing about TRE. You know, I've been a humanitarian worker for 15 years and working in a post-conflict, post-disaster situation. But I wasn't a clinician, you know, I was a disaster management specialist, but I always see the gap. How can we support these people like massively traumatized as a whole generation, you know? And the international aid is not really supporting that kind of work. So when I found TRE, I thought that was like a missing piece of my life, my work. You know, that's how I feel so passionate about TRE. I coming from my experience of directly working in the less developed nations, and working in the group, in the community, that is one of the most powerful experience in TRE. I work with a lot of people with disabilities in Asia. And then there is Yun from Vietnam on this audience today. I work with the veterans who has no legs, no hands, one eye, one ear, whatever, the whole like physically, you know, disabled people. And we teach TRE, and of course they cannot follow the standard exercise, but we just modify the exercise. Exercise itself isn't important. We can still turn on the tremor mechanism very easily. And I just want to share my experience that I had a group of disabled old people, like already 40 years since the end of the Vietnam War. And they've been, you know, suffering from the fountain pain, depression, low self-esteem, all of these things. We did 8 sessions over 3 weeks. Most of them have recovered from low self-esteem. Many people's fountain pains gone, therefore they could mobilize themselves, getting their own wheelchair. They started going out without anyone else's help. That boosts their self-esteem more. They feel more empowered. And then the number of the guys who went through the same experience of the war, but they never talk about it, you know, because talking about it is traumatic. But they doing this exercise together, sharing the progress together, somehow empower them as a group. Now they started to have an interest in learning TRE to teach other people with disability. And we are starting up the community-based TRE work in Vietnam. But that's how I see the light in this completely miserable situation that sometimes we feel so helpless in those situations. We don't know what to do with this massive distraction of humanity in those countries. And like David said, we see this, the number of people, many people in the same, went through same experience of trauma. They somehow start pulsating together as a group. When they start shaking, I feel the energy is start connecting one another with empathy, and then support each other. I worked with the girls and boys in the orphanage after the tsunami in Japan, and just simply teaching them exercise. They start teaching, one girl start crying, and then the other girl start reaching hand and hold the other girl's hand. Like, I'm not telling them to do that, but their humanity, their sense of humanity is activated by reducing their defense mechanism. And then there's a natural sense of empathy and compassion start coming out. And then that translated in the act to connect with others. And I think that's power of TRE. Without wording, without thinking, without teaching anything from our side, once their defense mechanism is reduced, understand that they are in a safe place, their nervous system relax, and our natural humanity start coming out. And I think that's the hope for the future.
Yeah, one of the things to add to that, Sai, is that I've worked with a lot of military, and the military, I use their terminology. They have a buddy system already set up. And so I tell them, okay, I'm going to teach you how to do TRE in a buddy system, meaning one person sits while the other one tremors, and then they reverse that process. And they have a phrase in English, it's called, I've got your back. I use that with policemen, firemen, emergency medical teams. If you're going to work with a group of people, Hindra does this in Indonesia extremely well. He worked with large police groups, police populations, or emergency medical teams, and he works with all of them together and teaches them how to work with each other, so that he simply introduces TRE to them, but they can put it within their own system of recovery within the police department or the medical system or whatever they're working for. So it works really well to use their terminology and to use their community, which is already established. Policemen know why policemen are in pain. And any Iraqi or Afghani soldier from the United States knows why their brother or sister is in pain. And they're the better ones to actually create a communication, because most of the time they don't want to talk to a therapist. They don't like us, basically, because they don't even think we understand their experience in life. And so there's such a possibility of creating large pockets of groups and organizations that can help themselves recover from trauma.
I think that's really wonderful, and hopefully hopefully that is the intention for introducing TRE and the many other sort of like techniques that are coming in here in Pakistan. I think the way people have responded in the questions, I think that just goes to show how interested and welcoming people are for TRE specifically here in Pakistan. I wanted to again thank Dr. David Berceli and Sai for this amazing conversation. It was really, personally, TRE has changed my life, and I am very grateful for you guys, you know, to share your wisdom and knowledge about TRE. It's pretty amazing, and it's always an amazing to be a part of this conversation with you guys. So thank you guys. Anyone who's interested in knowing more about TRE, they can definitely reach out to us at the Trauma Release Wellness Center. We have our email address. We'll be putting it up there. You can check out David Berceli's YouTube page. Traumaprevention.com is the website as well, which has all the TRE trainings and everything updates that are happening there. So again, thank you guys for being a part of this summit. Really appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Blessings on all of you in your counseling center. I'm supporting you guys in spirit a lot. I know you're going to do good work.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I'm happy to do the intro session on TRE to anyone who are interested in next TRE training.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sai. Thank you, David. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.